This is Kimi,
And this is Robin.
and you're on the Spirit Path. Hi, and welcome to Spirit Path Podcast.
Our intention is to share stories, inspiration, and tools for people to walk their own spiritual path, since everyone's path is unique and different.
We started this podcast to offer a refreshing new outlook on spirituality and holistic health. We've both studied and taught healing art modalities such as energy clearing, astrology, yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, angel therapy, and other esoteric technologies.
We'll draw upon our unique experiences of traveling around the world, visiting ancient sacred sites, and studying with world-renowned spiritual teachers. We'll also invite lightworkers, healers, and artists to share their wisdom and insights. Welcome to episode 2, Spirituality and Astrology, Soul Journey Through the Cosmos. So let's talk about astrology and our love and passion for astrology, or some might call an obsession. And I know mine started very on in life, but do you believe in astrology, Kimi?
Of course I do.
Okay, I knew that, but just so everyone else knows too. And so we wanted to, talk a little bit about what is astrology, how do these planets interact with us? Are we being impacted? And just, how we use astrology in our daily lives. So I think it's good to start with what is astrology, and also talking a little bit about what is astronomy. So astronomy is a branch of science, and it deals with celestial objects in space and the physical universe as a whole. So it's the study of stars, the planets, and space. And then you have astrology, which is the study of the movements and the relative positions of the celestial bodies. So it's an interpretation of how these planets have an influence on human affairs and the natural world. And when you start to study the positions and relationships of the sun, moon, stars, the planets and their relationships to the constellations, which you might hear Leo, Cancer, Sagittarius, things like that, it helps us to understand the influence of the constellations and planets on our daily lives.
Yeah, and this is also different from cosmology, which talks about the universe as a whole and includes the origin and evolution and ultimate fate of the universe. So there's quite a few controversies about astrology because a lot of people who study astronomy or cosmology don't really give it a lot of credit. They don't really believe in astrology. I know you definitely know more about that than I do, Robin. You're always telling me about, how can these people study the cosmos and they don't believe in astrology? And that's
yeah, absolutely.
That some of our favorite astrologers also kind of talk about. So do you want to just give us a little headway on what the latest controversy is between the two or the three?
Well, let's see. I know there's been some chatter, in some of these astrology communities about, how you have these world-renowned scientists like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, I believe is his name. And, they'll acknowledge astronomy, but then, there will be a campaign against astrology. So again, it's kind of like, how do you have astronomy and you're looking at the study of the planets and stars and things like that, but then you are not really even open really to even discussing, the depths of astrology, because they, again, are also influencing us through those planets and, the energies of those planets. And I always like to give an example of people like, you tune into the weather, every day or every other day. And, okay, if it's going to be sunny and, I'm going to feel the heat of the sun, on my body. Or when you think about the moon, how the ocean and the waves and the tides and the currents will be impacted when the moon is full, versus maybe when it's a new moon, things like that. Like if we're being impacted by the sun and the moon, how can you say, okay, we're not being impacted by the energies of Mars or Jupiter or these other planets? So anyway, it's people's, I guess, their own perceptions and beliefs about it. But I think a lot of times, a lot of people who, down astrology or discredit it, honestly, a lot of those people have never really even taken the time to really study it or to even really know what it is. They'll just say, I don't know I don't know what this is, or, or something. But I think it's hard, like once you really start to look into it, to really think like there's no validity to it, especially and we'll talk about, all the different civilizations who did entertain astrology.
Yeah, and I know Carl Sagan, he's a just world renowned astronomer and cosmologist. And he definitely was against astrology, which sucks because I love space and I love space science, astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology, all of it. But I also like astrology. But I feel like one of the main objections is there's no proof that these bodies kind of affect you. But I think that's an excellent point that you made, Robin. You're like, well, we watch the weather. We know if it's going to be really bright sun, you're going to wear sunscreen, or if it's going to be overcast, chance of rain, you might need your raincoat. So, same thing is true with the stars, allegedly, according to astrology. Um, you know, and it's really capturing the human imagination right now. I feel like millennials, especially, I feel like younger people are really into astrology and interested in what it has to say about them, and just kind of the weather psychologically, mentally, or spiritually of what's happening at the moment. I mean, you think about farmers' almanacs, and farmers definitely looked at the moon to know when's a good time to plant or not to plant. So, plant. So I'm sure these other planets can have some sort of interaction with us as well. You know, and in terms of spirituality, in our first episode, we talked a lot about this idea of souls having a human experience. So you might wonder, how does that connect with astrology? Or maybe you have an idea. Well, according to Edgar Casey, astrology reflects the soul journeys. This idea that your soul has, we are citizens of the universe. And we move from planet to planet and solar system to solar system, galaxy to galaxy, and these birth to death cycles. And you even can go as far out as constellations like Capricorn or Libra or wherever, that are huge star systems, millions of light years away. And these journeys that our souls go on, Casey called sojourns, and they're kind of like temporary residences that your soul would take on a planet or a galaxy or solar system. Kind of this residency is like an investment of time and energy. And these different celestial bodies you might visit, different galaxies or solar systems, constellations, they're like university program. Each planet, each star has a special area of something that it wants to teach you. So there are diverse opportunities in the universe, and planetary alignments and behaviors and urges and patterns and movements, they all affect us and sort of we create this history with planets or bodies that we have visited before. And these are also kind of reflective of our innermost selves. And I really love that idea. I think it's just beautiful and kind of fun to think about, like, oh man, I'm a Cancer, so maybe I was hanging out in Canis Major for a long time or something like that. And you create this, we create this resonance with these planets. And the human body is like a radio for subtle energy. So it's kind of like your astrology is telling you what you're already attuned to or what you're resonating with.
Ooh, fancy. Yes, Kimi is very passionate about science.
I am.
And I love how now it seems that some of the worlds are overlapping with science and, the studies of spiritual science or, things like that. And, to tell you how science is now finally backing up meditation and, backing up how your thoughts are impacting your life and things like that. So very good. Very good. Okay. So, there's all types of astrology that spans across, different countries and civilizations. I won't really, where it all began, but I mean, I know astrology is acknowledged in various ways in the Western world, Native Americans, in India, there's Vedic or Jyotish astrology, the African cosmos, China, Greece, when you look back in time, at some point, astrology was present in South America with the Mayans. So again, how can something that has been here for so long, for thousands of years, be, just not taken seriously or discredited? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But let's talk a little bit about Western astrology, which is what most people are familiar with, at least here, probably in the U.S. and maybe Europe. And then there is Jyotish, which is the Hindu astrology or Vedic astrology that people like maybe you tend to hear about in India. Me and Kimi, we had opportunities to have Jyotish readings when we visited Kerala, India, a few years ago with a yoga community that we were a part of. So Western astrology or tropical astrology or tropical zodiac is based not on fixed observable positions of the constellations, but rather on the changeable position of the sun. So that's what makes Western astrology different. In Jyotish astrology or Vedic astrology in India, they tend to base everything on a fixed position of the constellations as they see them in the sky. So you'll have different styles that'll have little differences there, or it could be a difference of maybe like in Western astrology, you have like the crab for Cancer or the two fish for Pisces. And then in other cultures, it might be different animals. And Kimi will talk a little bit about Chinese astrology, but the little differences there. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of a similar roadmap that they believe that people have that can give you clues about your tendencies, your personality, things you aspire to, how you express yourself, your things you tend to fear, or where your courage is. So again, there's a wealth of knowledge to know when it comes to understanding astrology and how it impacts you in your birth chart.
Yeah, I just know the difference for me between Western and Vedic. Western astrology, I just understand. I've been raised around that. I understand everyone has kind of the sun zodiac sign. That used to be a really popular saying in the 70s. What's your zodiac sign? Like something people use to kind of hit on somebody. I mean, I don't know. I still kind of use that today. Not necessarily as a pickup line, but that's definitely like a combo starter and fun thing for me to talk about. Like, ooh, I want to guess your sign. But I feel like Western astrology is a little more gentle as far as readings. Like when I got my Vedic astrology reading, it was so intense. And it was like based on life phases. Like I think you have like a moon period or Mars period. And the guy I just remember him telling me like, oh, you're going to be just getting more and more, what was the word? Kind of hated that word.
He said quarrelsome.
Quarrelsome. I like to think it's feisty, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm like, what do you mean quarrelsome? So it's just kind of little language things like that are even kind of funny to me. I don't know a ton about Chinese astrology, even though I do like it. And I know enough to know that I'm a dragon. Hello. Dragons, Chinese culture, that's cool. Bruce Lee, so good sign there. But what I recently found out, which is kind of cool, is that all of the Chinese zodiac signs have elements attached to them. So there's 5 elements, which include metal, water, fire, earth, and
not wood.
Maybe, I don't know. It's 5 elements, though. I can't believe I can't remember them all right now. That's what Google's for, everybody. So I found out recently I am a water dragon. How cool is that? So there's fire dragons, but I hear that water dragons are actually cooler. Like fire dragons can be mean. I don't know. If you're a fire dragon, let us know. Are you mean? Is that true?
I'm a fire snake.
You're a fire snake?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like the fire dragon also is reflected in my Western astrology because...
I'm not mean, though.
Sometimes. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I mean, who isn't? I am too, right? If you're not a little mean sometimes, then I don't think you're really human.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of, in my Western astrology chart, I have a lot of fire and water. So it's kind of cool to see the Chinese astrology reflect that, dragon and water, because there's also elements in Western astrology. It's so layered, you guys. You have signs, you have elements, houses, degrees, and clearly we're not going to go into all of that, but just a little smattering of everything so we can all kind of at least enjoy how we might be able to take part in astrology, you know, with the fun things like reading your signs in a magazine or listen to your favorite YouTube astrologer. Maybe at least you'll understand a little bit more of what they're saying.
Yes. So let's see. So when it comes to the signs are based on constellations and the movements of the sun and how the planets are interacting with the sun. So let's just break down maybe the 12 signs in Western astrology. So the way I'll go through them, I'm going to group them in 4 according to the elements. So again, each sign, like, Aries, Leo, things like that. So each sign is connected to either fire, earth, air, or water. Space isn't represented, at least in this situation. So fire signs. Fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. And then air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And then each of those signs are connected to what's called a ruling planet. So for instance, the fire signs, Aries is usually connected to the planet Mars. Leo is connected to the sun. Sagittarius is connected to Jupiter. And then earth signs, Taurus is usually connected to Venus. Virgo, I believe, is connected to Mercury, okay. Capricorn is connected to Saturn. And then the water signs, Cancer is connected to the moon. Scorpio is connected to, I believe, I want to say Mars or also Pluto in modern astrology. And then Pisces is connected to Neptune. And then Gemini, the air signs, Gemini is connected to Mercury. Libra is connected to Venus. And Aquarius is connected to Saturn. And I believe in modern astrology, also Uranus. So we'll talk a little bit about why that's important later. But Kimi's going to talk a little bit about birth charts, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, our own birth charts. But the birth chart will kind of tell you where these signs are and which planets are strong in your chart. And then you can kind of, start to listen to astrology readings and things like that, and then understand, what's going on. So let's just first start with the birth chart. Okay, so once you have your birth chart, you can take a quick look. If you've never had your birth chart done, you can either have an astrologer do it, or you can get a free summary of a birth chart at Astrolab, but it's spelled ASTROLABE.com, and you can get a quick free summary of your chart. So we'll put the information, the link and everything in the show notes if you want to go there, or you can stop by our website at the blog at spiritpathpodcast.com, and we have the information there too. So there are 12 signs, they're grouped according to nature's elements, and then each sign is connected or ruled by a planet. And then each planet represents an awareness or aspect of yourself. So this is why a person can have a sign like Gemini and say hey, this, when I read my horoscope, this doesn't sound like me. Well, it could be that your moon is in Scorpio, let's say, and the moon explains how you experience your emotional security. So maybe your sun sign is a Gemini, but maybe emotionally the way you handle things, it comes off more like a Scorpio, and you might relate more to that aspect, of your chart versus the sun sign. So, just depends on the person.
Okay, so now let's just do a quick scroll through the planets and what it looks like in our birth charts. So I'll start with the sun. That is your main sign. Everybody knows your sun sign. Most people do. Robin and I usually like to ask people, what's your birthday? Because sometimes people will think like, oh yeah, I'm a Cancer, but then they're born like September 11th.
Right.
And you're like, that's not
Virgo.
Cancer. That's
Right.
Virgo. So yeah, it's always good to just double check and look at your birthday. Like for example, my sun sign, I is right on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer. It's June 21. I'm a solstice baby.
Explain what
Holla.
that means, maybe for people who don't understand the cusp.
Yeah, I'm getting ready
okay.
to. I'm a cusp baby born June 21st. So that is right between the sign of Gemini and Cancer. It's the day when Gemini goes into Cancer. And again, that's why it's so important to know like what time you were born, because that can tell you what side you're on, especially if you are on a cusp. So for years, I thought I was a Gemini sun, and I just connected to it so much. I was like, I think like for 20 years, at least.
Well, I mean, I met you right. You were still a Gemini.
Gemini.
You were still Gemini when I met. Yeah.
I was like, for sure, I'm a Gemini. I can't stand Cancers. I don't even know what that's about. Then it was maybe in about 2010. I got my like first real chart done with Christopher Witecki, who is also on YouTube. And he's like, "Oh no, dear, you're 0-degree Cancer, like first foot into the Cancer door." And I was just like shocked, like what? So that was kind of cool to learn. So your sun sign, it's your basic character. It is like your main sense of self-expression, and it really talks about forms of experiences that you're attracted to and why. So as you can see, me going from a Gemini to a Cancer were obviously like two big shifts, and they're not the same at all. And what's cool too is I'm an 11th house Cancer. So it means I'm social and outgoing. And in business and sports, I'm a great team player. And my favorite part about this is that I'm not held back by social prejudices. I'm really proud of that, you guys.
And, you know, we're going to go through our charts, but we're not going to reveal everything about our chart. And I do feel like, I mean, even though I'm so guilty of this because, you know, whenever I do meet people, if I'm going into business or relationship, it's like, hey, I need to, when's your birthday? You know, what year, what's going on here? You know, so I can really just look and see like, okay, is this going to be a good thing for both of us? But at the same time, you know, I don't want to give like too much away about my chart because, you know, there is a lot of interesting information. But I will say, just as far as the sun sign, you know, I'm a little bit different from Kimi in that I'm a Sagittarius, and my sun and my ascendant sign are both Sagittarius. So I'm definitely a Sag. I've been told like, oh, you know, even some of the placements, like you've probably been a Sagittarius like in another lifetime. And it's like you definitely just get, you know, the full on Archer, you know, energy that comes from me. Yeah. However, I do have a lot of watery energy too, because a lot of times people, when they meet me, they think I'm a Pisces, but I do have a lot of 12th house different places. So as someone, you know, told me that, you know, I have a lot of fire in my chart, but they had to like water it down a little bit. So I'm not like, you know, too crazy out there, if you know fire signs. Anyway, so Kimi talked about the sun, the moon sign. So the moon represents your emotional security and your vulnerability. And that's what the moon represents. So my moon is in Scorpio. So it's really almost like a contradiction because the Sagittarius side of me, the sun and the ascendant, it's very, you know, happy-go-lucky, optimistic, and this and that. And then the moon and Scorpio side of me is very intense and determined, and I take my emotions very seriously. And I have the ability to, you know, make my life better because I know how to use past experiences positively. And then
that's because you take your emotions so seriously.
Yes, exactly.
It's a great gift.
Yeah. So sometimes when people are like, you're a Sag, but you know, I have that little Scorpio. So I do have a little bit of, you know, that emotional, emotional intelligence or openness or something.
And a mean side eye.
Yeah, and a mean side eye. I definitely feel like sometimes that moon in Scorpio is just, I can just really see, like, this person's lying to me, or, or just like that BS factor where, you can just tell what's going on underneath. And so anyway, the moon in Scorpio, it's in the 11th house for me. So even though it says I might be popular and people might pass through my life often, I'm seldom absolutely alone. And I definitely feel like that is true, because I do feel like I've had a lot of, just, people come and go in my life, and, but then I've never really felt like completely alone, which is a blessing.
Aww. Yeah. You're never alone. Okay, so our next planet is Mercury, probably my favorite. Probably because I thought I was a Gemini for so long, so I have a special connection to Mercury. But here's the funny thing, is that my Mercury is in Gemini. So it was around there somewhere. It just wasn't my sun. So the planet Mercury represents, it's closest to the sun, which I think is cool. And it moves super fast. And it's the planet of your mental life. It's about how you receive, process, and disseminate information. So with my Mercury in Gemini, I mean, it's true. I'm very logical. I'm super inquisitive. I always say that's one of my favorite traits is I love curiosity and mentally alert. Sometimes. I love inventing new words and sounds. That's in my chart, and that's so true. I love languages, and I adore slang and cuss words. I mean, I'm not averse to language in general. I think it all has a use and a place, and I think it's cool. And so my Mercury is in the 10th house, which means I'm able to apply my knowledge in a very practical way. Just a little insight on houses. It's you could kind of tell a little bit about a house because they line up to the zodiac sign. So, for example, the 10th house could sort of be similar or line up to Capricorn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense that it's like you're going to apply that knowledge in a practical way because Capricorns are very practical. So I'm able to turn skill with language into literary talent. Ta-da! So that's why I probably like to write screenplays.
Yes, and Kimi's one of those people who can visit a place and immediately pick up on the language. I'm so jealous because I am not, that is not me. But she can pick up the language real fast, and then the accent, and, like, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I love to imitate. I do. I adore imitations. Like we had this thing where we like to watch foreign shows, like Survivor, South Africa, and
South Africa.
Like what else did we watch?
It was America's Next Top Model, New Zealand.
New Zealand. Oh my god!
I love Kiwi's accents. I know.
It's like got to be one of those times where I'm watching it and then I can really like say something. There was some word though. What is it that we could not understand what they're saying? It'll come to me. It'll come to me. I'm sure you'll hear it at some point.
I know. Run. It cracks me up. You just did a real mean Japanese accent the other day.
I did.
It was really good though, but it's so
Shout
true.
Out to Yuki from Bachelor Winter Games. I adore you.
Okay. So then there's Venus, the sign of love and femininity and all those good things. So what does Venus signify? So Venus shows...
It also tells about your love nature and what you aspire to in life for like good things or beauty.
Yes, it does. And it shows you the way, that you express your love nature. And for me, I'm a Venus in Sagittarius. So once again, a lot of Sagittarius in my and a lot of fire.
Full on.
But I've been told I'm one of the nicer Sagittariuses. I just want to put that out there.
Yes, no, I'm not laughing at you.
This is like, what is going on?
I'm laughing at the idea that people say Sagittarius are mean because it's one of my favorite signs. And for so long, I did not know that. And then one day I heard it and I'm like, oh, but you have a lot of water. So I do think that nicened you up a bit. But I'm like, mean? Now I have to rethink everything.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're very blunt, and it can go both ways. You can have a blunt Sagittarius. It's like, hey, hey, friend, and just really, drop some bombs on you that can be helpful. Or you might have, it might express itself in a way where you're just getting really knocked down to the ground and you're crying.
I think some, I'm like whispering now, you guys. I think some Sagittariuses might also be a little cross. No?
Ooh, cross.
I mean, it's one thing to be blunt,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean mean. But, when you got like a chip on your shoulder, you're like, guess what? Don't really like people anyway. You stink blunt,
Oh, yeah, no, that's
a
not
little
me.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But let us know if you're Sag. What do you think? Or do you know Sages? Do you think they're nice? Do you think they're mean? I don't know. I kind of like them. I like that they're like learners, and I like the freedom. I love that about them.
Yeah. I mean, I like Sagittariuses too. And it's like the friends that I've had, who are Sages, like it'll start off good times and then something goes wrong. I'm like, okay. But anyway, so yeah, Venus and Sagittarius is now we've trashed them. I'm just joking. Just kidding.
We love you still.
Yeah, no. So my Venus is I love freedom. I'm very proud and impulsive when it comes to love and adventure, and I'm very open to other people's needs, and that's because my Venus in Sagittarius is in the 12th house. So if you think about kind of that Piscean watery energy, that's kind of where I'm at. So it's like, the fire and water vibe of it all. But it makes me very open to other people's needs and being generous with my time and money. And it means that I'm unselfish and I'm very powered by my sensitivities to other people's circumstances and a mystical inclination towards life.
And that's why you're nice, see? Because you're sensitive to other people's circumstances. And you have the moon in Scorpio, which means you take your emotions seriously. So you're very thoughtful in that way.
Ah, thanks.
All right, now here's my favorite planet, Mars. Holla. And this is probably because I have a ton of Leo in my chart. And Mars, I have a Mars in Leo.
Me too.
And so does Beyonce.
Yay, we're in good company.
A great company. Okay, so Mars, what it means, it is the planet of desires. It shows how you aim at goals and how you power yourself toward those goals. And it's the nature of your assertions. And it can also have something to do with a sexual nature too. But that's none of your business. Okay, so my Mars is in Leo.
I've definitely heard a little tea about us Mars and Leo, but
They were awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
We're awesome. So
PG.
PG. So it says Mars in Leo means your energy is totally committed to wherever your impulsive nature is going to lead you. So you're impulsive, but guess what? Once you decide on that target, you're committed to it.
Like, hey, everybody, I'm moving to Indonesia.
Right now. And I mean, I'm not kidding. But it also means you're benevolent, and that you have your method of getting what you want is to approach it as if you already have it. So you're not like some miserly or stingy or, just kind of malevolent presence about it. But there's something ennobling about you going after your goals or your desires, whatever that is. And the way we do it is we're just like, you know what? Hey, guess what? I'm in Indonesia now. It's happening. It's all happening right here. So my Mars in Leo is in the first house. And that's also because it's my ascendant. So yeah, I got a lot of Leo going on. It means I'm strong-willed. And if something is not to my liking, I'm definitely apt to take some action toward it rather than just suffer. That's according to my Mars in Leo. But I also have another aspect in my birth chart that says sometimes I'll stay a little too long in bad situations. So you can have conflicting traits like that in your chart, and it could just show where there's a little tug of war going on within your personality.
Right. And see, just because, let's say, both me and Kimi and Beyonce have our Mars and Leo, it can be in different houses. So like Kimi was saying, hers is in the first house. So for me, my Mars is in the eighth house. It's still Mars and Leo, but it's in the 8th house. So I have, again, powerful emotions.
See, this is why Robin's so psychic, you guys. And also a nice person.
Thank you. You broke me down, building me back up. Just joking. Eon LeVan style.
You're mean, but guess what? You're also nice.
Exactly.
It's like a mind game.
I'm like, shh. No, I'm joking.
It's my Mercury and Gemini.
So, Yeah, so yeah, powerful emotions on my end and intuitions, and that helps to keep me on target with my major projects in life. And it also means I'm an advocate for important community and societal values. So, explain some of my background and working with people and communities and building up, I guess society through yoga. You can even maybe even say law in that sense because lawyers are social engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you definitely keep us on target with the podcast. Like, get in here, record now.
Yeah, that's my Mercury in Capricorn.
You don't do that. I'm really kidding. She does not yell like that at all.
No.
So our next planet is Jupiter. What does Jupiter represent? Jupiter shows us our values and where we feel confident and in control. And it shows where we feel we have something to teach others. So my Jupiter's in Taurus, which means I value the conventional and practical and solid. So, I mean, definitely I value things that are kind of real and practical. That's so true about me, I think.
Yeah, both my parents have their Jupiter in Taurus too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I can see that, how we, all three of us have that in common. Yay, us. I also have positive feeling. For what others are worth. I definitely see other people's self-worth, which I feel like makes me inspirational sometimes, maybe, or annoying. I don't know, because
no,
depends on if you want to hear it or not.
You're inspirational.
And my concern for other people prompts me to be quite generous. Like I just said, maybe, I'm going to offer you some pick-me-up advice, whether you want it or not, and be like, hey, you're worth it.
Yes, and I feel like because that's one of your a good quality about Kimi is that you're able to I think use that Mercury and Gemini to communicate something to someone, but then I feel like your Sun in Cancer and that Jupiter in Taurus, as far as like tapping into positive feelings and other people's self-worth and things like that, you are really able really well to like give information and advice, or even if it's something like awkward or you don't want to hear, how to couch things and say it, but say it in a way that's just not only that it's like warm and where you can receive it, but it's also very like that practical, logical side that the Gemini Mercury is. So it's like where you can say it and then you kind of feel like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or, and you're not, it kind of disarms the ego or something like that. Like when you're maybe, giving someone advice or some much needed advice that like, maybe it would be hard for somebody else to hear.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just really quick. So I just want to say my Jupiter is in Taurus, but it's in the 10th house.
Oh, right.
So that is kind of cool because it says that I might be helped often in my climb in life that by people who are a little further along or higher up than me. And
That's
I
dope.
do feel like, I know, I was like, huh, really? Do I know this? But I do feel like, maybe being generous, I feel like that's reflected back toward me. Like, I feel like whatever you put out there is reflected back towards you. So I feel like it's kind of one of those self-fulfilling prophecy things. Like, I have this concern for others and I see their worth and I tend to be generous toward them. And I just feel like that's reflected back toward me. So, yay, me.
Saturn. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. So Saturn is represented as a planet where you feel obligations and responsibilities, fears. It shows an area of your life where you are restricted. And so for me, my Saturn is in Virgo. So it really pushes me to have more faith in life and to avoid being wrapped up in endless dissecting. And with my Saturn and Virgo in the 8th house, it helps me know how to discipline myself and keep my desires in check. And so, definitely with my sun and the ascendant in Sagittarius, and even a lot of that 12th house energy. Sometimes when I, read things, it'll say like, oh, Sages are, they go from one thing to another, or, they might take up one hobby and then they're moving on to the next. And I mean, in some ways I can be like that, but then I do feel like I have enough Earth in my chart with this Virgo and Saturn and some of my other planets that I do know how to discipline myself. So, I've gone through periods of my life where, maybe I'm not on like a traditional schedule, and I can kind of wake up and go to bed, at different times, and, not have a set office as I'm going into, maybe a job where I'm out in the field. But then at the same time, I know how to like switch into that space of being on a schedule and having a more uniform flow of my life too. So it's nice to be able to have both sides of that. So also, let's see, we need to.
And that was just a snapshot of your personal plan.
Right. So once you, like I said, if you go to that website, Astrolab, or just type in free astrology birth chart, you'll put in your information about your birth and time and the location you were born. And then it'll pull up all of this. So it'll be like, sun and whatever your sun sign, etc. And then it might also show you, the meanings of each sign. So then you could start to, focus on how to use your chart and, find your strengths, find your weaknesses, and to be able to just really tap into things that you're naturally inclined to or naturally good at. So I'm going to give a little overview about the transpersonal planets. So these are the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So Jan Spiller, she wrote the book Spiritual Astrology. Great book. Excellent book. And that was really I think the first book where I really started to go deep into the chart. It was right around when I met Kimi back in college, and she had that book. And that's when I even learned, I had a whole chart, not just my sun sign and ascendant. So anyway, Jan Spiller, she says that the transpersonal planets depict the route to evolutionary expansion, and that Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they represent, as the three of those transpersonal planets, they represent the urges that can permanently fulfill. That's Neptune. And then, let me back it up. So the transpersonal planets represent urges that can permanently fulfill that which we ultimately seek. So Uranus represents total knowledge, Neptune, unending bliss, and Pluto, the full awareness of your personal power. And also with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, depending on when you're born, those three planets tend, if you're born, let's say 1970, between 1970 and 1979, I'm just giving an example. Well, that whole generation might all have the same Uranus or the same Neptune or Pluto. So it's when those planets that are closer to the Earth tend to represent who you are personally, and that might differ from each person. And then those outer planets represent, your generation. So, Spiller also talks about when experience teaches us that we cannot count on others to satisfy our personal urges, then we rely on our position or social participation to bring us lasting satisfaction and peace of mind. So that's when we start to look for higher answers that will help us to fully enjoy our life without feeling victimized by emotional traumas or unexpected upsets. So she says these transpersonal planets, they help us to grow beyond the boundaries of social awareness and more into participating with humankind as a whole, as part of the whole universal plan. So these transpersonal planets, they're activated whether we are consciously looking for them or not. And when they're operating unconsciously, if you're on, Uranus, if you're operating unconsciously, that Uranus can become a destructive or erratic, or a Neptune can become deceptive, or Pluto can abuse power. So when you look at Uranus, that's where it's you have that feeling of aliveness. You want to embrace change and excitement and freedom and predictability. It's known as the rebel, so when you look at Uranus in your chart, it'll tell you a little bit about your generation. I'm very curious about the Parkland students who went through the shooting. I'm sure if we looked at their generation's chart, it might say something about maybe not trusting authority figure and taking things into your own hand, or pushing back against power and corruption. I'm sure you'll find something along there. And then Neptune, the planet Neptune, urges us to merge and experience ongoing bliss and well-being. So like a unconditional love, euphoria, a oneness. It's known as the chameleon or the dissolver. And then Pluto urges us to transform, to release oppression and fear, to change for the sake of gaining personal empowerment, sort of an out with the old, in with the new energy, or transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. And it also represents death or taking risk and a willingness to totally surrender.
And maybe just a little bit about, because this is something Robin and I talk about all the time, is our Pluto is in Libra. And that is all about how partnerships are changing and the way people conceive of marriages. And I mean, that has completely happened in our generation. Just people aren't marrying for the same reasons. Gay marriage is now legalized. You know, there are different kind of partnerships. There are open marriages. There are multiple spouse relationships. Just
blended families.
It's just like the way we're conceiving about those partnerships are completely changing. So I think that's kind of cool and exciting.
Right.
Okay, so now that we have all these planets, we kind of know what they represent and how the snapshot is telling us what that means for us or our generation at that particular moment. Now it's time to talk about, well, what about day to day as those planets and signs are moving around? You know, the planets are spinning and revolving, and so things are changing. And when these planets are moving, they're called transits. And that's what gives you like your daily horoscope or what's going to happen 6 months from now, because we can see where planets will be positioned. So some important transits we're going to kind of go through and discuss right now are solar and lunar eclipses, new moon and full moon, planetary retrograde, with special attention to the popular Mercury retrograde, which everyone talks about now, and the life changer, Saturn return. Robin, do you want to just tell us a little bit about the solar and lunar eclipses?
Sure. So, and the solar and lunar eclipse, these are things I'm learning more about, you know, each year. But I just know in your chart, you know, you have a solar and lunar eclipses that will happen each year, and they're sort of like an end of a cycle. So I know we're going to have an eclipse, or did we just have it?
We just had one.
February?
Yeah, February 16th, I feel like.
Yes, right. So that eclipse was wrapping up you know, when you think about back in August of 2017, when we had I think it was a solar eclipse and you could see it from Earth, and you know, that was like one of the last ones maybe we'll see from the Earth, from the United States. That, you know, that was, you could visibly, some places you could visibly see the eclipse happen. So from August to February, like that was a cycle of an eclipse season. And I'm not as well versed on as far as the transits, but I do know in your chart you have the North Node and South Node. And the North Node,
Are those eclipses?
Right.
They are eclipses.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, yes. The North Node is connected to what you're supposed to be learning in this lifetime and implementing and learning in this lifetime. And then the South Node kind of talks about things you might have learned from your last lifetime that you're trying to unlearn now, in a sense, some things, or let go of to learn new lessons. So I'll give you an example. Like my North Node is in a sign where it's all about partnering and cooperating. So that's like something I have to, you know, constantly do and learn in my life, you know, this life and everything. But then my South Node was in Aries. And so it talks about like, you probably had a past life where, you know, you were on your own, in some sense, or very independent. So, you know, for a long time before I really read that, it's like, you know, in my mind, I just really value my freedom and individuality and independence or whatever. And it's like, you know, in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, if I just do this, then, you know, I can be completely independent and I won't need anybody, you know, or I can just make this happen on my own. And then when I was reading my chart, it's like, no, actually, the more you try to do that, the less you're going to get, you know, the things you desire, you know. And you know, and I mean, we live in a culture that, you know, tended to support that. I mean, it's changing now, you know, but then when I kind of like let go of those ideas and just became more open to, you know, partnering and you know, if I had something, a weakness, and looking how to shore up that strength or find resources, yeah, I did, you know, go a little bit farther in things that I was trying to do. So that's kind of how the North and South node can work, and the eclipses are connected to that. So which eclipses were happening, you know, when you were born that year or had just happened.
Because we have solar eclipses, which is where the sun is blocked by the shadow of the moon, and then lunar eclipses, which is where the sun blocks part of the moonlight, is it? But eclipses, they're not like regularly occurring things where they don't happen like every month, right?
No, they might just happen. I mean, there can be any from like 2 to 4 a year, because and then something it could be partial or full eclipse.
Right.
And then some, you know, sometimes you may or may not see what's happening, but it's, you know, it's going on.
Right. You may not see it, but it's happening. And usually eclipses bring big change with them.
Yes.
It's like an opening or closing of an energy door. Like you were saying, this eclipse that happened in August kind of opened a door that closed in February.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like that was a period of time that was influenced by those eclipses. And so I always think that's kind of neat. And you have signs. Like eclipses will also be in a sign. So I think the one on the 16th was it Aquarius?
I think so.
Oh, yeah, I feel like it was. So, and that's kind of cool because you can, once you get a birth chart, you can kind of look on your chart to see what house Aquarius is in for you. And then you know what area of your life's being affected, where doors are opening or closing, by looking at that house. So that's kind of neat. Now, a monthly transit that does happen is the new moon and full moon, and that's something we can see. You know when the moon's full and you know when the moon's new, which is no moon in the sky.
Darkness.
Right, complete darkness. And then there's the waxing and the waning. But really the new moon and the full moon have very specific energies. The new moon is usually about drawing in. When you want, like Robin and I love to do new moon wish lists. That's a great time to kind of really put your wishes out there and just sit and meditate on it and really feel the energy of what would it feel like if I had these wishes, and just kind of use that new moon energy to really kind of plant that seed. And then the full moon is a time for releasing. It is a great time releasing. You can make a list of things you want to release and then burn it or rip it up or however you want to dispose of, or even drown it in water. Those are kind of cool symbolic things to do with that new and full moon energy. And just like the eclipses, they also have signs. So you can have a new moon in Cancer or a full moon in Sagittarius. And again, you could just look on your chart, if you have a chart, to see where that falls and what's going to be affected in that area. So, you know, what should you look to release? It might be something around work or finance, or what do you want to draw in? That could be something with relationships. Just examples of how you can kind of use that energy to work with you.
Yes, I like that. And then we have the retrogrades. So retrograde is when the planets will appear like they're moving backwards in the sky, and things will tend to slow down around either that, you know, around that planet or what they represent. So one of the most popular retrogrades, it's Mercury in retrograde. It's becoming more of a mainstream, term. It's just so funny because I remember we used to talk about these things over 20 years ago, and then now you hear it, you know, in more everyday conversation from people. Even though I feel like, you know, sometimes people don't really know what they're talking about, but
no, but they'll still say it.
They'll still say it because it sounds
like,
right.
Oh man, I don't know. Mercury must be in retrograde or something.
Right. It's funny, but yeah. So, you know, again, Mercury is the planet of communication. So when it's in retrograde, it appears like the planet's moving backwards, and that's a time to slow down, reevaluate, review, and just not rush into contracts or rush into, you know, decisions that you don't have to make at that time. It's kind of just a breathing period where you can, you know, try new things, or sometimes people come back into your life from the past, or you might just have to resolve something from the past or something in order to move forward. So
it's definitely not a time to sign contracts.
No.
And I think one reason, just really quick, why Mercury retrograde is so popular is that it has such an effect.
It does.
Like, when it's coming on, you're all of a sudden you're sending emails to the wrong person, or you're leaving a voicemail for the wrong person, or that voicemail you left for some reason gets erased automatically, or just some weird thing like that. So it's a good time, I've heard, to do things that start with RE, like review, relax, reconsider, but not a good time to kind of sign contracts and start a new venture.
Right. And of course, life happens, but if you can avoid it, or just and let me just say this too, Mercury in retrograde, we usually have at least 3 a year, sometimes 4, and it'll last for about 3 weeks, or 3.5 weeks. So, the next one will be coming up, I think it is like at the end of March, and then it'll end by like the second week of April or something like that. So, it's good to know, because then if there's stuff that you need to kind of, push forward, you want to try to get that done before Mercury goes in retrograde if possible. And then, just take that time to re-examine, things you're doing or trying something new, and not committing, to too much, or taking things at face value during that time, because things could change, so.
Yeah, and we've started things during a retrograde period. Sometimes you have to, but just know that there's a high probability that something will be altered with that plan.
Exactly. And then they also say too, if like communications, can be off, and like your phone or your computer, something so many people will be like, oh my God, like as we talk about this, I'm like, yeah, I need to back up my computer. Let's get to back up your computer before retrograde, things like that, or have important conversations before, because the communication wires can get crisscrossed during that time.
And that's also a time where, you said this earlier, Robin, I just want to piggyback on where the past can come back up.
Oh yeah.
Maybe people you haven't seen in years, or that good old ex pops back up into your life. I mean, that.
Or in your dreams.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, you all know who you are. I'm joking.
And it's like, you can feel the energy coming on, where you're just kind of like, what? That's weird. I can't believe I just saw that person. I haven't seen them in years.
Right.
And now they're just like popping up, like, oh, retrogrades around the corner.
Yes. And then too, so again, Mercury goes in retrograde a few times a year. And then you have certain planets like Mars and Venus and Jupiter. So those planets may go retrograde like maybe every other year, or every couple of years, or things like that. And so again, depending on, what sign that planet is in at the time. So for instance, maybe like, let's say Jupiter goes in retrograde in Cancer or something, and then maybe you look at your chart, and maybe it's impacting your family life, or your relationship with your family, and things like that. So then you just kind of know where to put some of that re-examining energy or something. Yes. Or maybe you got to rethink about, am I going home, for this event this year for Christmas, or okay, do I need to, reach out to this person in my family, at this time. So I'm just giving an example. And then some of those planets like Jupiter and Venus and Mars, they may go into retrograde for 4 months, versus just like, I think for instance, this year, I believe Jupiter and Venus might be going into retrograde, but they may go into retrograde maybe just every couple of years, but it's going to be in retrograde for like 4 months, So again, just knowing how these things are working together, these planets are working together, and how to work with the energies.
And the last transit we're going to tell you or discuss here is Saturn returns.
Oh yes, Saturn.
Now that's kind of a big deal, because it's like, it happens. You have a couple of Saturn returns in your life. The first one happens around 28, is it?
Yeah, like 28, 29.
Yeah, 28, 29. It's kind of like your first real baptism by fire. That's where, you can be coasting along, having a good time, but that's when it's kind of going to be one of those things that's going to change you.
Yeah, it's like you becoming an adult and having like going through the the fire to get the wisdom to be able, as you are approaching 30.
It is. It's definitely like a baptism by fire. I'm glad you said that because I was thinking that, but I didn't say it. But it is.
Yeah. Just, do you want to say like a few things, just general, about your Saturn return?
My
Your
Saturn
first one?
return was really strange. It was right around the time where I was starting graduate school, my master's degree, and I was just kind of in a very strange sort of transition, and I don't want to say too much, but
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I'll just
it
say
was definitely a bit of a baptism by fire.
well, I just know, when I started my Saturn return, I had graduated law school and was, starting to work and do things, and then several people in my family became very sick, and there were several deaths in my family that year, and that completely like shifted and changed me and everything. And I got depressed, at one point, and gained weight, and but then at the same time, on the bright side, that is really when I really got into the idea about holistic health and healthy living and the mind, body, spirit connection. But and then I think I ended up moving too. That's when I ended up moving and leaving Illinois. But all of that, at the time, it just felt like it was a horrible nightmare. But then a lot of wonderful wisdom came out of it, and I really, embraced maturing and being an adult and just reshifting my life and things like that. So that's the beauty of the Saturn return.
Yeah, and then you have another one around 50s.
Yeah, for instance, Barack Obama.
He's going through his Saturn return.
His second Saturn
return now, and so is Wendy Williams. They're
both
around the same age, and they're kind of going through big shifts that I'm sure you can see on television. Again, that's what Google's for.
Right. Yes. So how do we use all of this? Because I know we've talked a lot, about our charts, but the way I like to use astrology is to understand more about myself. Because when you think about it, you're born, and then you're immediately taking in your parents' beliefs, societal beliefs, things you're taught in school, and it's very easy to start becoming somebody that you're not, or thinking, things that you're naturally doing aren't valued or important. So in understanding your chart, it helps you to understand yourself more, how to utilize your strengths and show up your weaknesses. And it helps you to be able to tap into the power of these energies of these planets and how to use them, for yourself. So if you know that you are a great speaker, and you, like, for instance, like Kimi with her Mercury and Gemini and communicating, well, it's like, it makes sense that she, pursued being a writer, or pursued teaching, or, things like those are things that are, she's talented at, that kind of naturally come to her, and it's good to know how to use those things. And then if there's something where maybe that you're not as strong at, then you can kind of be aware of that. And then again, looking for your strengths and how to shore up something that isn't working for you. So that's kind of how I like to use it. And, in the long term, it's great to have an astrology reading with an expert, because then they can get really deep into your chart, because there's so much like mathematics and degrees of the planets and various things like that, and how the planets play off one another. So they can really go in depth to all that. But in the meantime, again, if you can just get your free chart and start to, listen and notice these astrological updates, you really kind of feel like you're working with the universe, and you feel that universe being reflected back to you, and you can see yourself in the universe, which I think is neat.
And we just scratched the surface, literally, because there's so much to astrology. But I feel like, it's enough where you could kind of go forward, and when you are listening to your astrological updates, you kind of know what to pay attention to. For example, a lot of astrologers say it's good to listen to your sun sign, your moon sign, and maybe your rising sign when you're listening to our horoscope. So now that you know where to get your free chart, you can kind of listen for each of those. And your sun's always going to be your strongest, and then your moon may tell you a little bit about the emotional landscape, and your rising is kind of your overall self-expression, how the world is viewing you.
Yeah.
So that's a helpful way to kind of use that. So, who are some of our favorite astrologers
Oh.
we want to introduce to people?
Oh, let me just add one more thing. I was just going to say too, when you do start to, listen to these, the transit and astrological updates, it's like you're hearing the planet's emotional weather. And that way it can kind of get you ready for what's happening that day or later on in that year. So like if Mars is in a really good aspect and, that's a very assertive, strong, active planet, and you're trying to start a business or go out and market yourself, and Mars is going to be, in a well aspected placement for, 2 months, then okay, this is a time for me to like go hard and really put myself out there. And, but then if something is happening where Mars is in retrograde, and it's not a good time to be putting yourself out there, but more of a time to reassess or, reflect on things, then that's what you want to do. You don't want to be trying to like, get out there and force something and that planet is not even there to assist you. So same thing like with the sun. I mean, if you're looking to, go out and plant a garden and start a garden, you're not going to do it in the middle of winter where the sun's can't, shine on and help grow that plant or whatever you're growing. So, it's very intuitive. It's not really, rocket science or anything like that. It's very intuitive once you start to learn things. So yes, let's talk about our favorite YouTube astrologers and people who've helped us, and continue, to teach us about it. So, of course, let's start with Chris Witecki. Chris Witecki, he's one of the first people that ever gave me an astrology reading back in, I think in like 2008. And he's still on YouTube under either Soul Garden or Soul Garden and Serious Joy. Yes. So you can find Chris Witecki. And I like Chris because I think his mom was an astrologer, or he has a really deep background there. And he was on YouTube. Actually, he had a show on in Chicago on WGN back in the day where he would give a little astrological update. So Chris Witecki is good. Astrolata, she has her own channel, and Lotta, she also features other astrologers on her channel. But again, I like her because she really goes into the transits, and even though she's giving you an update, you're really learning a lot about astrology in the process. Stormy Grace, she's a bubbly little personality on YouTube, and she puts videos out all the time, and she'll give I think weekly astrological updates. Then there's Kelly Rosano. Again, she likes to work with female entrepreneurs and women empowerment and things like that, which is cool. She also does monthly astrological updates, and also talks about some of the eclipses and new moons, full moons, as well as Jean Wiley. I really like Jean Wiley too. And she's an astrologer, also intuitive as well. And she talks about, the full new moon aspects. And she'll talk about things that are happening throughout the world and these little shifts and changes. Deborah Silverman. She is an astrologer, but I believe she's also a psychotherapist. And so that's just a cool little mix there. And she'll give you the transits of what the sun is doing and the moon is doing every few days. So again, that's a great place to even start to even understand, just how that little dance, because the sun will stay in a sun sign for, about 30 days, but the moon will switch signs, every few days, or it moves very fast. And then there's Peace Dealer. Some people know him as Magic Mike, but the Peace Dealer, he's on YouTube as well. And he's a new guy. He's a little quirky, young guy. He like reminds me of like my little brother or something in my head. But it's like he'll do astrology, but then he'll also kind of throw in his own. It's almost like a variety show, stand up. It's a lot happening. But Mike will talk about the transits, and then he does just like straight channeling sometimes. But let me tell you, this young man, he can have his silly side and everything, but then there's been times where he has just said something that literally has happened, right as he's saying it. And I mean, very specifically, like he will be like, I am talking to you, and this is who you need to watch out for. And I mean, it has really shocked me, at times, of his accuracy. So, hopefully we'll get to have some of these people on, and you'll get to know them, or, you can go check them out on your own.
Yes. And I just want to add one thing. If you do want a chart, I know Stormy Grace will give you a pretty comprehensive natal chart, only for like $20, which is a steal.
Yeah.
And she just emails it to you, and it's so useful.
It's like 40 pages.
Yeah, you can see all the houses. You can see how your planets are aspecting each other. It's super insightful and very convenient.
Yes, I highly recommend Stormy Grace's chart. I mean, I'm still reading through mine.
Me too.
And I mean, as much as I knew about my chart already, just from my own readings and in my own studies and everything, I still, there's stuff that she's talked about that I've never heard before, so, and I like the way she really organizes all the information. So
that sums up our Astro Talk. We hope that you found something valuable in this today, at least going forward, like how to listen to your horoscopes, and hopefully they can become more useful to you.
On our next episode, we'll be talking about divine guidance, receiving messages through our senses, called the clairs. It's one of our favorite topics.
Favorites.
I really feel like these are things that people need to learn at a very early age, or, in school even. I mean, it's a game changer.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about, this idea that your body is an energy sensing tools. Like, we're receiving information through our senses all the time. Touch, smell, taste, hearing, and even your imagination is a sensory tool. And so you're receiving messages all the time, and we're going to talk about how to tell if those messages are just the desires of the ego, or if they are true divine guidance. It's coming in through your higher self, or spirit guides, or loved ones on the other side. Angels. Oh, another one of my favorites. So that's going to be a really fun show next episode.
Cool.
All right, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the Clairs show. That was weird.
Okay.
House of Cards.
All right. So we'll see you on our next show. Thanks for stopping by. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all of our listeners and supporters.
Let's keep the conversation going. We want to know, what is spirituality to you? How do you define it? Leave a comment on our Instagram at Spirit Path Podcast, or hit us up on Twitter at On the Spirit Path, and please use the hashtag Spirit Path.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And if you enjoy the show and want to support, please leave a glowing rating and review on iTunes.